So it's 1:30. We are going to get started. Thanks for being here. My challenge is to keep you awake right after lunch. Hopefully you're ready to hear about next generation security. My name is Anand and I'm a principal solutions architect here in the AWS Mumbai team. And today we are going to be talking about next generation security. Now, why is security traditionally so hard in the enterprise? Increasingly, what we see is the sophistication and the volume of the rising number of attacks that an enterprise has to deal with. The security teams really have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's the volume, the sophistication, and the methods that they use to deal with it. Today, the methods are primarily, manual intervention, and at scale, nothing can be done manually. The second aspect is the expense in the amount of money that is involved in addressing these security threats. A large amount of money is spent, but yet they are not able to identify the true threats because a lot of them are distracting threats. And that's what traditionally security has been hard in the enterprise because of the lack of visibility. You're not able to really see entire visibility right from the place where the security threat originated, right up to the point in your network, in your infrastructure, in storage, in compute, as well as in the application. Primarily because there is very low degree of automation. So most enterprises have taken this approach of either I move fast or I stay secure. And obviously they will err on the side of being secure because that's the primary concern, and so should it be. But it should not be this choice that I can only stay secure and not move fast. And if I try to move fast, I'm going to be really unsecure because I'm opening up the floodgates for someone to be able to inject into my system. Now, what are some of the factors that are affecting this change that are driving enterprises or companies to take a more aggressive approach to look at next generation security? So expanding regulatory concerns or oversight, as you see, increased competition. There is tighter focus on information security. You see some of the laws that are being brought into place, obviously around data privacy, around data residency, as well as addressing the fact that I want to be able to have a visible, controlled, and auditable environment. Also, I talked about the rising volumes of data. The threat vectors keep changing every day. You have to be able to find the noise, the signal from the noise. The rapidly changing compute paradigm, as well as the scarce resources. Obviously, if you try to do all of this on premise with infrastructure, you're going to need infinite resources, and that's not possible. You only have so much amount of money that you can put to try and address some of these security threats. So it's not necessary that you have to have this choice, whether it should be moving fast or staying secure. You can actually do both in the cloud. And that's what we are going to talk about today. How does AWS help you build a next generation security infrastructure with some of the services that we provide? The reason why AWS is the preferred platform and it's the most secure platform is because large sensitive enterprises run on AWS. Some of these examples are there for you to see. FINRA, which is one of the largest regulators, financial industry regulators in the US, they use AWS to run secure workloads, analytics workloads specifically. And you also see some other companies there, not specifically financial services companies, but Slack, which is a collaboration platform, as well as DNA Nexus. They also run genomic analysis and clinical studies, but they use our security services to really help comply with not only a regulator, but also internally with their stakeholders. So to start off with, security is job zero for us. Security has always been a top priority at AWS. And this is specifically because the AWS cloud is engineered right from the grounds up to bring the same traditional isolations that you would do in a traditional on-premise environment that you can do on the cloud. Right from infrastructure security, so whether it's server hardware, network, and storage. In addition, every security improvement that we make is available for all the customers, whether you run a workload for $1 or whether you're billing $1 million. We believe in the fact that every customer should have the access to all the security features that are fundamental to running workloads on AWS. Additionally, we also make it easy for you to implement some of these security functions. For example, if you want to do things like encryption, if you want to do access management, we provide the tools, the techniques, the best practices for you to do that. Within the paradigm of shared security model. Now, what does a shared security model mean? I'll talk about it. So that's where the shared security model really helps put the underpinnings for AWS cloud. Everything right from the virtualization right up to the physical security is what AWS takes care of. For you to stay secure in the cloud, you have complete control of the data. So you decide where the data resides. For example, whether it is in a particular region, whether it is across regions, it's completely in your control. If you want to encrypt data, some of this data can be sensitive. So you decide whether you want to use AWS security tools like key management service, or whether you want to use server-side encryption, whether you want to put data in an S3 bucket, you want to turn on encryption. That's completely under your control. I talked about moving data across different regions. AWS will never move data for you unless you explicitly tell us. For example, there is a feature called cross-region replication. You can use that feature to move data. And clearly, we have some customers who use that to build highly resilient sort of cross-region DR scenarios. We will get into some of these services as I talk through my presentation. AWS compliance is inherently available for you. For example, we have a large number of financial services customers who ask for regulatory requirements. For example, is your cloud certified for ISO 27001, cloud security, ISO 27018, cloud privacy, SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, which are services organization controls. So all of these are tenets that are available in the AWS cloud for compliance. You can easily go to a tool called Artifact, just download all of these certifications, and then provide it to your auditor saying, yes, I am running in a compliant environment, and here are the security audits that my cloud provider has gone through for me to be able to run these workloads. And you will find these across a large number of organizations that have certified. 50 plus such certifications exist. So what exactly are the benefits? I gave you the threats, or what exactly does next generation security mean, and how do you address those in the AWS cloud? So what are the benefits again? You have global security compliance, which is available through our compliance certifications. You have scale with superior visibility, and I'll talk about what are the services that allow you to get this visibility, the tracking and the auditability. You have the higher standards of privacy. I mentioned the ability to decide which particular region you want to put your data, how you want to encrypt that data. You can easily integrate them with other services, and that's the whole idea of the breadth of the platform. Every service, any service that you choose, we have integrated them with our security solutions. And obviously, we have a very large partner network. Right after me, I'll have Akhil come here, who is from Checkpoint, who will be talking about their particular solution that they have built, extending the platform capabilities. So I talked about these 5 areas that AWS security solutions can be grouped into. And these are the 5 areas: identity, detective control, infrastructure security, data protection, and incident response. And I'll go into some of these services. I'll not be able to cover each service, but I'll go into some of these services. So what does identity and access management mean? Identity and access management means any user who is provisioned to spin infrastructure has the right set of identity and access management. So you should be able to say a developer should have these set of access controls. A deployer or an administrator should have these set of access controls. So you can create users and roles, and this is a service that we again provide it for free for all users. You can integrate them with multi-factor authentication. So when a user is logging in, he has to enter either through a Google Authenticator, or you can even integrate them with these hardware Gemalto-based tokens. So what are the 3 things that you can do with IAM, Identity Access Management? You can authenticate users, you can authorize users, and you can audit them. You can audit them either they come in through the console or they come in through an API. Any sort of access to a resource can be audited, as well as can be authenticated using identity and access management services. Now, going to the next pillar, which is detective control. Detective control means I want to have complete visibility. I mentioned earlier when we started this talk, today, traditionally, next generation, the security threats that are there are extremely difficult because of the visibility. The volume that comes, it's extremely difficult for someone to visualize what are the different threats that are coming in. Guard Duty really does that extremely well. It can analyze billions of events that are coming in, and then can analyze within those billions of events a specific unusual unauthorized activity and then flag it off. For example, if you have a leaked credential that someone is using from a malicious IP, it will identify it and then thwart it. So that's what we built this particular service for. I'll talk about it in the next slide here. What are the different kinds of threat detections does it do? It looks at reconnaissance, it looks at instance compromise, and it looks at account compromise. So if there are any such instances, this particular service will intercept it using all the flow logs, the CloudTrail logs, using the VPC flow logs. It will analyze all of these logs, and you can imagine these can be thousands and thousands or millions of events. It will analyze all of those and then flag it and say, hey, this particular instance has been compromised because we believe it's coming from a malicious IP, or a particular access credential was used, which we feel is leaked because it's coming from a list of IPs that we think is malicious. So you should take action. Controls and visibility. If you talk to any CISO, your security or InfoSec organization, they will say, I want to be able to see visibility, I want to do control, and I want to do auditability. If I can satisfy these three pillars, I am okay to run regulated workloads. And that's where control and visibility comes and plays a very important role. So here, CloudTrail is that service that allows you to do that. It does, so in this particular case, if you are using something like a key management service to decrypt data, it will tell you who decrypted that data, when was it decrypted, where was the data decrypted from, and it will then store it for auditing and inspection. So again, giving you complete visibility into who is accessing a particular piece of data and why was it accessed. So the next pillar is infrastructure security. Within infrastructure security, the whole idea is to reduce the surface area, right? You want to reduce the surface area as much as possible so that your attack vector and your threat vectors are minimized. So that's where we provide some services like EC2 Instance Manager or Shield. Shield is a service that, Shield Standard is a service that is available for all the users. Any user that comes on our platform, any account that is created is protected through AWS Shield. What does it do? It protects you at layer 3 and layer 4, which means it does automatic detection and mitigation. Things like SYN or UDP floods or reflection attacks, all of these things are protected through AWS Shield Standard. Now, in addition to that, if you want to do things like layer 7 DDoS protection, if someone is hitting your server with a large amount of requests and you want to be able to identify at the layer 7 level through a WAF, you can do that through Shield Advanced. It's a self-service and pay-as-you-go approach. Another aspect about infrastructure security is this whole idea of getting operational visibility of all components that you're using in your AWS accounts. For example, today, if you are running an application, it may be using some EC2 instances, it may be using some EBS volumes, it may be using some S3 service, right? But they are all distributed across different consoles. If I want to bring all of that in one pane, EC2, the systems manager component allows me to do that. Within one console, I'll be able to see by application and get complete operational visibility into my infrastructure. Another aspect is patching and automation. A lot of times people build golden images, but then a new patch comes in, I have to patch it. Systems manager automates that entire process. You can go and automate the patching of your different EC2 instances. Now, one great thing about systems manager is it's not just for AWS resources. It can also manage on-premise instances. So it works in a hybrid world where both on-premise instances as well as AWS instances can be monitored and can be managed effectively. The fourth pillar is data protection. Again, data is extremely critical in regulated workloads. If you have requirements for encryption, an extremely important piece is our certificate manager services, or even key management services. So under data protection, we have multiple such services that we provide to protect your data right from data in transit right up to data in rest. So let's look at key management service, right? Key management service allows you to encrypt your data and store it in any of the services, whether it is in an EBS volume, in a file system, or in a bucket. That encryption can happen through a key that either you bring in or you use an AWS generated key. So we have multiple options there. You can generate your own key, bring it into key management service, and key manager will then have the rotation policies applied to it. Or you can, if you don't want to do that, you can use AWS key management service. So that's where ubiquitous encryption really comes into play. Encryption at every point, whether it is data at rest or in motion. You can do it in a database, you can do encryption, or if you're using EBS volumes, which is basically like file systems that you create, you can encrypt that entire volume. And these are one-click encryption options, right? These are not something that are complex to do. But we don't do it for you because we don't know whether you need to encrypt that data. So that's where the shared responsibility model comes in. For example, here, it shows you the entire end-to-end flow of encryption right from in transit. So when the data comes in, when the traffic comes in through the Elastic Load Balancer, it hits the web servers. From the web servers, then it hits some buckets in S3, or it's hitting EBS volumes, or it is hitting some of the other services like Glacier. And then it's using keys that are retrieved from the key management service, which again, CloudTrail is completely integrated into all these services. So it will again give you a trail of who accessed this particular key, why was it accessed, when was it accessed. Incident response is the fifth pillar. In incident response, you have things like automated responses. Whenever a particular incident happens, if you want to notify that, hey, this particular AMI was spun up from a particular, this particular instance was spun up from an AMI which is not in my repository, which is not compliant with my repository, or which is not compliant with my corporate security policies, you can then trigger off automated responses. So again, within the next generation security postures, you have things like everything as code, right? Because it's software defined environment, you can define all your security policies, whether it's a firewall rules, whether it is patch automation, all of those can be defined as code using CloudFormation and then literally deployed. Things like automation of compliance is something that I'm going to cover now. So here's an example of automating compliance. I have a certain set of guidelines my InfoSec department has put together that I need to follow. Some of them are red, which means these are not allowed. These are green, so I have to rotate passwords every 90 days. That's a policy that I define. Now, do you want to do this manually? Probably not. How can I do that with automation? There is a service called config rules. I define all of those rules, codify those rules. In fact, you don't even have to define it because we give you AMIs which are approved through CIS, Center for Internet Security. All you have to do is go, select that AMI. It already has all these guidelines implemented. These are at the OS level. Now once, if you want to implement it at the account level, we also give you tools to do that. So again, complete flexibility in defining some of these rules, and as soon as a particular violation is found or a non-compliance is found, a trigger is sent and said, hey, this particular resource is not compliant, I'm going to shut it down, or you can take an action. So here's an example of an automation for encryption. A user launches a new server which is without encryption. Config reviews that change because your corporate policy says that you cannot spawn any new server which does not have encryption enabled. It goes and says, this particular server is not compliant. If it is with encryption, then obviously that server is allowed to be spawned. So some best practices for security. You always want to be able to refer to some of these. First is, I mentioned CIS, which is Center for Internet Security Benchmarks. We provide you both at the OS level as well as at the account level CIS benchmarks implemented. Second is some white paper resources that you should certainly follow. Things around IAM, Identity and Access Management, infrastructure security, logging and monitoring, and data protection. As well as we have an entire comprehensive cloud adoption framework that our professional services team can come and enable you on. We also provide something called well-architected security. This is a free service that will help you analyze and help you determine whether you are compliant within the security framework defined within the well-architected. Finally, I want to talk about what Gartner says, right? CIOs and CISOs need to stop obsessing over unsubstantiated cloud security worries, because there are several tools and techniques to do that. And I just showed you among those 5 pillars what those are. But you need to be able to develop new approaches to cloud control and not really think in terms of, hey, this is my on-premises security control. How do I just bring that onto the cloud? You can easily do that, but you can literally extend it way better.